Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me on the second episode of the Sorce Law Podcast. My name is Joseph Sorce. I'm a personal injury attorney here in Melville, Long Island. And on today's episode, I have a special guest with us. We have Crystal Young. She's a friend of mine for over 10 years. She's been a practicing attorney for over 20. She's done thousands of closings, and she specializes in real estate. So on this episode, we're going to talk about what you should do in the event you come into some money from a settlement or otherwise, whether it's $50,000, $100,000, or $250,000. You want to invest that money, and what better thing to invest in than real estate? So Crystal, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go through the process of what somebody should do when they're ready to make their first big purchase.
Well, first, Joe, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Congrats on your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, of course, of course. So my name is Crystal Young. I am a real estate attorney. I am also an author of a best-selling book, You Too Could Be a Homeowner. And I've been in the real estate industry for over 20 years. I started as a paralegal. Now as an attorney, I represent first-time home buyers, investors, purchase, sale transactions, and also residential and commercial transactions.
So you've seen it all.
I've seen it all.
From beginning until end.
Yes. And I love representing particularly first-time home buyers because I love explaining the process. You know, it's always their first time.
Right.
Biggest purchase they'll ever make. So,
right.
Yeah, it's really fun to be able to
help them through the whole thing.
Yeah, to help them through the process.
Let's say we have a client, they call me, we get them a nice settlement, they get $100,000, they want to purchase their first home on Long Island. I say, call the best real estate attorney I know, her name's Crystal Young, and they call you, and what's the first thing you tell them? How do they start the journey to their first home purchase?
Well, I love that once they get their settlement, you'll send them my way.
Yeah.
That's like amazing.
Tax-free money.
Yeah, seriously, it's tax-free money, and, you know, purchasing a home, that's the American dream. We know that.
Yeah.
So you certainly want to use that settlement money wisely. So if you were unfortunately in a situation that would require you to, you know, go through a personal injury matter and you get the settlement, it's amazing, and you certainly want to purchase a home. So the first thing I would say is that they need a pre-approval because, okay, you received $100,000, but we know if you're purchasing a home in New York, that $100,000 is certainly not enough.
No.
So you'll probably want to apply for a mortgage.
Okay.
So you want to start with a mortgage lender, get a pre-approval. The pre-approval will ultimately explain what your purchasing power is.
Okay.
And so can you afford $1 million home, or would you qualify for $1 million home? Is it in your best interest based on your financial circumstance, or maybe a $400,000 home?
Right.
Yeah.
So the down payment is just unfortunately a small piece of the puzzle here.
Yes, just a small piece of the puzzle. And there's so many loan programs that are out there. So perhaps for a first-time home buyer, you may want to apply for an FHA loan where you only have to put down 3.5%. So you may not have to use that full $100,000.
Right.
You can actually use some of that to buy food.
Buy food, maybe put some furniture in the house.
Food, furniture,
do some renovations.
Yes, blankets.
Yeah, the important stuff.
It's supposed to snow today. Yeah.
So what other factors do you think are important so that they have a nice chunk of change, $100,000, which is a substantial sum of money no matter how we look at it?
Yes.
What other factors are considered by a lender before they give this client a pre-approval letter?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked because it's not just the $100,000, but I mean, they're going to look at your credit.
Okay.
They're going to look at your employment history. They're going to see if maybe you filed bankruptcy during the time
Right.
you were out of maybe work during your personal injury case. So a lot of factors the banks look at to give you that pre-approval and tell you what your purchasing power is.
So what do you think is a good loan for a first-time home buyer with decent credit, not excellent credit, but decent credit, maybe above 600. They have the $100,000. They make a decent income. what would you say is the FHA the best route to go, or are there other things that they should consider before making that application?
Yeah, another good question. There are so many loan programs out there, so it really depends on their personal financial situation because, for instance, a VA loan, that's for a veteran.
Okay.
And there's no down payment programs available for VA loans.
Wow,
So
zero down?
yeah,
Wow.
zero down. Yes, absolutely. So if this is a situation where, you're working with a veteran, then maybe that's the best option. Maybe a first-time home buyer would use the FHA program. So there are many programs that are out there. There's also grants as well
Oh,
that
interesting.
are available through the city and the state.
So do you recommend, in your experience, I mean, doing this for over 2 decades, do you think, you always hear you need 20% down, 20% down is ideal. Is that something that you recommend, or is it kind of really just, does it come down to the monthly payment? What is someone comfortable with?
Yeah, it really depends on your personal situation and what you're comfortable with. Do you need to take your 20% and put it all down on a home? No, because there are other expenses. You have closing
Oh,
costs.
yeah.
You actually have to move,
Right.
and so you have moving costs.
Right.
And so there are so many factors. So maybe you don't want to take 20% of your cash
Right.
and stick it into a home. Maybe you only want to use the 3% or 3.5% loan program to purchase your first home.
So there's a lot of programs out there for everybody
Absolutely.
based on their needs.
Yes, for sure, 100%.
So we get the pre-approval letter.
Yes.
Let's say it's, I don't know, $600,000-$700,000,
Right.
which on Long Island, unfortunately, isn't a ton of money. How the
Right.
market is.
Right.
And what's the next step? Do they call you? Do they call a broker? What do you suggest?
Yeah, the next step, you want to find a real estate agent.
Okay.
Why do you want to use a real estate agent? Because they're going to be able to listen to your needs and find you a home where, you want to live.
Right.
Where do you want to live? Do you want to live in the city? Do you want to live in the suburbs? What are the taxes? Because also, it's not only did you get pre-approved for 600 or 700,000, but you take into account the taxes on the house. So 600 or 700,000 in maybe Brooklyn, it does get you a little bit something different than
Right.
what you'll get on Long Island because they're taking into account the hefty taxes
Right.
that. Yeah,
And
so
even Nassau versus Suffolk.
yes, exactly. Even Nassau versus Suffolk. So you certainly want to speak to a real estate agent, a professional.
Okay.
And also when you're making an offer on a home, your real estate agent is able to give you comps. And
Right.
so they'll tell you, okay, well, I see this house is listed for 700,000, but it's really not worth that.
Right.
It's worth 650, so
Okay.
let's offer 650.
Right.
Maybe, I wouldn't particularly know that in
Got
a
it.
particular area. So, but a real estate agent is trained to look at the comps and tell you if you're making a good offer or not.
And then you have the agent, you have the pre-approval letter, you find a house you like, you get an accepted offer,
Yes.
and then you go into contract fairly quickly within a week or so.
Fairly quickly, you
And that's
want to
where
go.
you come into.
That's when I
yeah.
come in. Yes,
But
absolutely.
before that, can you help a person find an agent? You have a number of people that you trust?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay.
There are agents all over the state of New York that we work with.
Oh, great.
So we can always refer a great agent for you for sure.
Excellent.
Yes. So after your offer is accepted, you want to do a home inspection.
Is that before
And-
contract or after?
Yeah, that's before a contract.
Okay.
So before you sign the contract, you want to do a home inspection because that home inspection may give you a little wiggle room in the price.
Okay.
If the house is essentially falling apart
Right.
and say you need a new roof, the roof is maybe $20,000
Right.
for a new roof. You may be able to now renegotiate the purchase price that you offered to account for the new roof that's needed on the house.
And that's
So,
important. It's before the contract is signed,
yes,
correct?
it's important because once you sign the contract, you're bound by the terms of the contract.
That's it.
So if you sign a contract for $700,000 purchase price and then you do a home inspection, there's no negotiating because you already signed the contract. You're bound by the four corners of the
Got it.
contract.
So let me ask you, once the contract is signed, right, do you have to come up with any money at that point, or is it all pending the closing date?
Yeah, so once you sign the contract, when you sign the contract, actually, you put down a portion of your deposit. Why? Is because it's consideration. That makes the seller secure that you are actually going to move forward with this transaction. So when the buyer signs the contract, they put a portion of the deposit down. So for instance, if they're applying for a FHA loan with 3.5% down,
Mm-hmm.
maybe you'll put 1.5% down when you sign the contract and
Okay.
you bring the rest to closing along with your closing costs.
Okay.
So you make two payments, right, at two different
Right.
times throughout the transaction. One when you sign the contract and then one at the end right before you receive the keys to your home.
So in this market we're in, and before we get to after the contract signed, in your experience, things seem to be picking up a little bit now.
Yes, they are.
As far as a buyer to be considered a strong buyer, do you have to be a 20% buyer, 20% down? Is it okay to be a 3.5%? Like, generally, in your experience, what does a seller look at before they're going to pull the trigger and pick somebody? Okay, I like this buyer versus this buyer,
Yeah,
something else. What do you, real life, we're in Nassau, Suffolk County.
right.
What do you think?
It really just depends on the seller.
Okay.
If you have multiple offers, the best offer would be the highest price,
Okay.
right? And so that's what they're looking for. Okay, what's the highest price? They're also going to look at, well, how quickly can you close? Because
Okay.
if you can close in 30 days and then you have someone else that can close in 90 days and you're under a time
Right.
constraint
You want to be out.
because, yes, you want to be out of your house. Maybe you, as the seller, are in contract to purchase a new home, so you
Right.
need to close within a certain time frame. Then, yes, that may be you may choose the buyer that can close in 30 days. So there's so many factors: purchase price,
Mm.
when can you close, perhaps loan type, but not really. It
Okay.
just really depends. Whether you take a FHA loan or a conventional loan,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, your seller's still getting his
The
purchase
same
price.
amount of money, right?
So it doesn't really matter
Okay.
what loan type. It's really just how quickly can you close. And, is your purchase price competitive with maybe all the other offers that
Right.
came in?
And did the
Mhm.
lenders dictate closing timeline, or is that dictated by the buyer's wants, or generally, how does that work?
Yeah, so when you're purchasing a home, there's a team of professionals. You have seller and buyer, both have attorneys. Your bank, your mortgage lender has an attorney as well. So
Okay.
when we're determining a closing date, all parties are involved. The two attorneys representing buyer and seller, the mortgage company and their attorney are all involved. There's a title company that's involved as well. So in determining a closing date, all parties have to agree
Be on the same
to
page.
close and be on the same page. So your seller may want to close, on April 5th.
Okay.
And, the buyer's bank, maybe the rate's going to expire on March 31st.
Okay.
There are ways that we can actually close without maybe the seller actually attending the closing,
Oh, wow.
so the buyer doesn't lose their rate.
Right.
So there are ways we can get to the closing table even before parties actually ready to close.
And can you lock in a rate as a buyer in your experience for any time, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? How does that work generally?
Yeah. So that's something you're going to lock with your mortgage lender. So
Okay.
your mortgage lender, according to your personal circumstance and loan type, will lock your rate. So you want to do that for sure once you sign a contract, because you want to know what rate you're purchasing.
Right.
The rates have been a little wonky,
Yeah.
flex.
Yeah, up and
They're
down.
all over, up and down. We know during the height of the pandemic, we had rates in the threes,
Yeah,
and
it was nice.
now we're in the fives or six.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you certainly want to lock your rate when you can, or when suggested to lock your rate by your mortgage lender.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we get to the contract, it's signed. What's next? We're waiting to close on the house?
That's
Okay?
good. As soon as the contract is signed, your mortgage lender will receive a copy. When your mortgage lender receives a copy, they will order an appraisal to be completed on the house.
Okay.
Once the appraisal is complete, your loan goes into underwriting, and ultimately what's music to our ears, we hear your loan has been cleared to close.
Okay.
That's what we all want to hear. Once the loan is cleared to close, that's when we can start talking about closing dates.
Okay.
But one thing I left out, that's what the buyer is working on with their lender. Now, I'm involved as well as the attorney, and I want to ensure when you purchase a home, you're purchasing a home with clear title. So I will order a title report after the contract is signed by both parties, and that title report will tell me a story of any judgments, liens, violations on the property.
Okay.
And I work with the seller's attorney to clear those things before we actually get to the closing table.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So how long does it take to generally get the clear to close letter? In 30 days, 60 days?
Yeah, we like to say like 60 to 90 days.
Okay.
Some lenders, I mean, they can approve a loan within 20 days,
Right.
30 days. So it really just depends on the mortgage lender. And again, always your personal situation.
Okay.
Also, if the seller is available to close, maybe your mortgage lender approves you in maybe 2 weeks or
Okay.
30 days, and the seller's just not ready to move yet. So it's always case by case.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we get to the closing, right? And that's
Yes.
that's the finish line.
Yes.
So you're at the closing, obviously, with the clients, right?
Yes. And so my role as a buyer's attorney is to explain the deed, the transfer docs, which are documents that are issued by New York State and New York City.
Okay.
I also explain all the mortgage documents. So your note, your mortgage, all the affidavits that have to be executed. I'm there as your attorney, and I make sure you understand the stack of documents
Right.
you have to sign
It's
on
the
that
most,
day.
you're going to sign your whole life pretty much, right?
Exactly. You're signing your life
Yeah.
away. That's what we say.
Right. And how about as the seller's attorney?
As the seller's attorney, same.
Okay.
I explain the deed, the transfer docs, which again are issued by New York State, New York City. There's affidavits that are signed.
Okay.
I ensure as a seller's attorney that your mortgage is paid off and paid in full
Right,
at the
right.
closing, any violations or liens, anything that has to be paid. For instance, like if you have solar panels, I'll ensure that your solar panel contract is assigned over to the buyer, so you're no longer responsible for it
Right.
after you close. So that's my role as the attorney, whether I'm representing the buyer or the
So
seller.
you got your hands full either way.
Yes. Yes.
So I just want to pivot a little bit. So investment properties, right? Sometimes we
Yes.
have a client, they already have their primary house, and they come into a nice settlement, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, and they're like, okay, I'm looking for a house to potentially retire in, or a condo down in Florida, whatever it is. Is there any things that they should be aware of that's different from, let's say, like a first-time home buyer, that this is their primary residence, as far as how much money needs to be put down, or in your
Yeah, that's
experience?
a really good question, because there are different programs if you are investing.
Okay.
Maybe the interest rate will be a little different.
Okay.
It depends, because if you're purchasing a home, say, that has tenants and the tenants are paying rent and there's leases involved,
Right.
then you can present those leases to your mortgage lender, and that's going to help you get approved maybe
Right.
for more than you would have if the house wasn't fully rented.
Got
So
it.
yeah, there are many factors, but you'll work with your mortgage lender who will walk you through all the financing
The whole process.
aspect, of purchasing a investment property.
Excellent.
Yes.
And Crystal, another thing I want to talk about is the fact that you're also a best-selling author, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
that's me.
you wrote a book during the pandemic.
Yes.
It's called You Too Can Be a Homeowner, and it's by Crystal Young Esquire, as you could see. And you can find a copy of the book on Crystal's Instagram. It's crystal.younglaw. And Crystal, why don't you tell the audience what made you write the book and what you think first-time homeowners can get out of it?
Yes. Oh, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about it. Yeah. So You Too Can Be a Homeowner came about during the pandemic when they shut everything down. I had more time on my hands. And I was thinking, well, what can I do to kind of fill in this time? I was actually having a conversation with Jermaine Miller, who owns J.M. Publishing. And he said, Crystal, every entrepreneur, every attorney, every professional needs a book. You do every day. You're going through the process of purchasing homes with your first-time home buyers, over the phone, why don't you just put it in a book so they have a resource or something that they could refer back to? Or even if you were just thinking about purchasing a home, this book contains stories of people that thought they wanted to purchase a home and they got nervous and they weren't sure. And ultimately, we talk about how they were able to overcome their fears and end up at the closing
That's
table where they were
fantastic.
closing with me. Yeah. So that's what the book is. The book is really a guideline of the closing process. We talk about pre-approval, we talk about the home inspection, the appraisal, and all the way to your closing table and what you need at the closing table, your IDs, everything, things we don't think about.
Right.
More than one ID, actually. A checkbook.
Yeah.
Who has a checkbook now?
Right.
You
Yeah,
pay
I know.
everything online.
Everything's online on your
So
card.
it's all in the book. If you're thinking about purchasing a home, you too can be a homeowner. We'll really walk you through that process.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you.
It's been an amazing episode, and thank you for all the insight you gave all our viewers.
Yes, definitely.
And I'll leave you to close it out here.
Yes, I appreciate you for having me. I love what you're doing. I can't wait to catch all of your episodes. And thank you all. If you're looking to find me, you can find me on Instagram or Facebook, Crystal Young. It's crystal.younglaw. So I'm available for all of your real estate needs.
Thank you very much for joining us on the second episode of the Sorce Law Podcast. Thank you for my amazing guest, Crystal Young. We hope that you got some education and information today on today's podcast. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Crystal. She's on Instagram and Facebook. You can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook. And thank you again for joining us.